Well, thanks very much for that introduction. And yes, you're absolutely right. In a way, we are at the forefront of it, even although we don't have trade union rights. But the reality is, are the trade union rights in this country worth having with all the anti-trade union legislation? And we don't take action willy-nilly. We do it if our members determine that they've had enough. And on certain issues, such as pensions and a variety of other issues, they'd had enough. In 2007, we took national strike action over a variety of issues, including safety, overcrowding and pay, and it was a very successful day. Now, we've been without our trade union rights since the Tories ripped them away from us in 1994 under the Criminal Justice Public Order Act. So for 19 years, we've effectively been devoid of having those rights. But I've got to say, we've taken more action in the last 19 years than we've done in the preceding 70 years. So if that's anything to go by, because trade unionism wasn't born out of being compliant. It was born out of workers' struggles and workers fighting instead of hiding. That's the reality. Now the POA, as I've said in many forums, took Resolution 5 to the TUC last year. Seems quite a while ago now. And it wasn't to cause dissent amongst the trade union movement. It wasn't trying to be flash. It wasn't trying to do anything. What it was trying to do was pull everybody in the same direction. And I say that because no single trade union will win the argument by themselves. Might help their own industries and their own sectors gain concessions, but it's not going to achieve anything substantial. Because I'm not going to stand here and have a pop at any trade union or any general secretary or anything like that, because in everybody's own sector, they're working wonders in order to tread water, because that's what we're doing at the moment in every sector. The reality is, as you've heard, the CWU are coming for action in relation to privatisation of Royal Mail, and quite rightly so. PCS have been leading the way on a variety of different strikes. RMT are doing the same. Unite and other trade unions, the teaching unions, the POA. But what we need to do is pull it together. Pull it together, as Linda and Rob have said, and start talking about a coalition of the willing to coordinate. I don't care whether we call it a general strike. I don't care whether we call it Mickey Mouse. But the reality is, pull it together so that we're coordinating mass action, mass direct action, because that's the only thing that this coalition government will understand. I haven't spoken about that austerity isn't working, because I'm not going to come here and insult all your intelligence. We know it's not working. We know what the problems are. But what we need is a resolution to those problems. Because I read an article by Kevin Maguire in last week's Daily Mirror, and he hit the nail on the head. What he actually said was that a Tory minister came up to him very smugly in conversation and said, "We're getting away with it in this country because we never expected such an easy ride. We expected much more." You actually look at what Brazil and Turkey have done, and Rob has explained that in relation to it. Sooner or later in this country, we'll be at breaking point and people will come together for that mass action. But I would much rather that the trade union movement were leading that action and not leaving it to students' groups or pensioners' groups. What we need to do is pull all those groups in and coordinate it as one. That's the reality. That's what we should be doing. And instead of building £250 million super jails in Wales, like they've just announced, what they should be doing is spending £250 million on keeping people out of prison in the first place. Because until you get to the root problems of crime, such as drugs, mental health, poor housing, unemployment, lack of education, we're just going to go around perpetual revolving door syndrome. Now, I'm not making an excuse for people breaking the law, but that is some of the symptoms that we have in our society, and we should be ashamed of it. Lack of investment in affordable housing, the way we treat our elderly, and then we look for the Labour Party in opposition to be a credible opposition. And quite sadly and frankly, they're failing in that. And I say that as a Labour Party member. And I'm quite ashamed that we've got to keep coming here and different forums and saying, why is it that Ed Balls and Ed Miliband are apologetic for what's happening at this minute in time? Why is it that they're not offering us hope and an alternative and putting in a manifesto that they will get rid of the anti-trade union legislation once and for all, that they will put at the top of their agenda renationalisation of all the privatised industries that have gone out? Why has it become a dirty word to make those sort of promises? Why do they have to keep saying we agree with public sector pay freezes? Why do they have to say, well, in 2015, if we win the election, we may well have to stick with the austerity measures that the Tories have put in? That isn't what the British public want to hear. The British public want hope. They want hope for generations of the future. And I'm afraid Labour will be in wilderness unless they give us that hope for future generations. So they need to stop being apologetic. They need to set out an alternative policy and manifesto and get Britain back working and out the hands of the bankers and the people that caused the problems in the first issue. But colleagues, we've got to get over the fear. And I think Rob mentioned Nye Bevan before. Well, it was Nye Bevan that said, we know what happens to people who stay in the middle of the road. They get run down. And I say, if we stay in the middle of the road, we're going to get run down. So the trade union movement needs to be alive and kicking come this TUC Congress, and we need to start putting plans of action in that takes collective and joined up action so that we can rock this government to its foundations. Thank you.
Well, thanks very much, Steve, and we'll move swiftly on to Billy Hayes of the Communication Workers Union.